All right, everybody. My name's Stephanie. I am super excited to talk to you today about my favorite story in pretty much the entire Bible, Mary Magdalene. The Bible gives Mary mad respect. She's only talked about 14 times in the entire New Testament, but 9 of those times she is the first in a list of women. And that is a really big deal because names in the New Testament were always listed in order of importance in biblical times. So the first person named in a list is most important. You see that frequently. The only time that Mary was ever outranked was when she was standing at the foot of the cross next to Jesus's mom and his aunt. That's it. She was only outranked by mama and auntie. The remaining 5 mentions are related to her role in the resurrection of Jesus. And Luke begins her story in chapter 8, verse 2, where it says, "And also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases, Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out." Now that is a weird introduction. 7 demons, what? Now, kind of on a related note, many of us struggle with mental health. And those of us who don't usually love somebody who really does. And so we need to know about this passage. It's very important to recognize that the number 7 is a sacred number in Jewish literature. The number 7 symbolizes completeness and wholeness. It is the day on which God rested and completed his creation. It is the number of the earth before the fall. It's wholeness and perfection. So why? Why would Luke use that number in relation to demon possession? That's weird, right? I mean, that's weird. But it's not so much weird as really bad news. Because what Luke is trying to tell us is that Mary is completely and wholly consumed by darkness, by the demons within. There is no area of her life that is free from the darkness. Her home, her family, her husband, her kids, her health, her job, her hobbies, her sleep, her worship, all of it is darkness all the time. No escape, no break, no way to get out of this. Luke is telling us here that Mary's life is literally a perfect hell. Can you relate to this? Do you know somebody? Do you love somebody who can relate to this? And then she meets this guy, Jesus. He casts out her demons, restores light to her darkness, frees her from all of that, and gives her a new purpose and a new role in life. She has a place with him as his disciple. He treats her with respect and dignity, and he requires that everybody else do the same. And so she can say with Asaph, who wrote Psalm 73 in verse 25, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you." She is freed from the darkness and is now able to devote her life to this weird guy who says that he's the savior of the world. And Mary was not only a devoted student of Jesus, she was also very rich. So she traveled with the disciples and she paid lots of the bills. And to be a woman disciple at that time was unheard of, as usual, women were relegated to the kitchen and the children. And in fact, there is this famous prayer that began, "Blessed are you, O God, King of the universe, for not making me a heathen, a slave, or a woman." Gross. But Jesus, he made no distinction between men and women. All could be his disciples. And so she traveled with them. She walked the dusty roads. She camped with them. She ate with them. She sat at his feet with the others. She listened to him teach about loving everyone, including your enemy. She watched him cast out more demons. And with the empathy that comes from having been there, she understood the greatness of the gifts he was giving. As he healed people from their diseases and made paralyzed people walk and gave sight to the blind and the deaf their hearing and even raised a guy from the dead. Mary was there when they made that last fateful trip to Jerusalem. She saw the people of the city celebrating as they bowed down to him, crying out, "Hosanna! Blessed be our great Savior and Rescuer." She watched him as he was challenged over and over again by the religious leaders. They were trying to trap him, and he was having none of it. He called them out. So they called him demon-possessed and the son of a whore. He called them a brood of vipers and whitewashed tombs. They told him to quit. He said, over my dead body. We can only imagine how Mary would have felt as she watched all of this. There was love and there was healing. There was hatred and violence. There was a sense of anticipation that something was in the air, but it wasn't clear if it was good or bad. Now, since she was a disciple, she could very well have been at the Last Supper with Jesus. But she was definitely there later after he had sweat his blood at Gethsemane and endured that total sham of a trial. She caught up with him at the foot of the cross, standing with Jesus' mom and his auntie. She watched. She watched as Roman soldiers nailed huge nails into the arms and legs of her love. She heard the mocking voices of men telling Jesus to save himself. She watched as guys gambled for his shirt. She heard his final cry, and she watched him die. And then remaining with him in death, she was there when Jesus was taken off the cross. She followed him to the tomb where he was laid, and then she went home to what was supposed to be a holiday weekend. It's Passover. This is the celebration started 1,300 years before, when God did miracle after miracle after miracle to free his beloved people from the slavery of Pharaoh. How totally and completely ironic that God could save his nation from Egypt, but he did not save his son from the hand of wicked men. Are you kidding me? What in the world is happening right now? And so as Mary headed home that terrible Friday night, we can only imagine what she must have been thinking and feeling. But what Mary did not know that weekend, what no one could have known but the heart of God, was that this moment was the climax of a story that began at creation. The great creator himself, emptying himself into the womb of his creation, pouring his heart and his soul into his disciples and his people. He invited all who would come to him to try out his burden and to experience his rest. But then, after just 3 years of ministry, he allowed himself to be brutally killed as he carried every sin and every weakness that has ever afflicted mankind. And he didn't just stop there. He didn't just die. He then marched straight into the realm of the dead. He freed his children from their eternal separation with God and took away all the power that death had left. Now, after conquering death and restoring humanity, he sat down on the throne at the right hand of God, for it is finished. But it's not finished. He checks his holy watch and he realizes it's Sunday morning. So he gets back up from his throne, high fives a few of the angels on his way back down. And get this, think about what this had to have been. He is sitting on his holy throne and he pours the entirety of the glory of heaven back into a cold, mangled, tore up, bloody corpse lying in a cave to head back to us. Now, meanwhile, the women have no idea that any of this is going on, and they have had a terrible weekend, right? They're traumatized. They are confused. They are horribly sad. And to make things worse, their friend Jesus has not even had a proper burial. So, since they weren't sleeping anyway, they got up early on Sunday morning and they headed to the tomb. And as they went, they were discussing how on earth they're going to get to Jesus's body, which is not idle chit-chat, because in all honesty, this trip is probably pointless. The tomb was sealed with a Roman seal. And anybody who was caught messing with a Roman seal was immediately crucified upside down, no questions asked. The other problem is that the only people likely to be at the tomb this early in the morning were the 16 Roman guards. And even if they could somehow be sweet-talked into getting permission to mess with that seal, they were not going to move that 2-ton rock holding in the dead body of a traitor. It was not going to happen. So this whole trip was probably pointless, but what else were they going to do? So they went. And you've probably heard the story. It's super famous, right? The women arrive on the scene. The guards have either fled or are passed out in shock. And the stone is not only rolled out of the way, but the Greek word there means picked up and carried off. So that rock is gone. And there's angels hanging out in front like a totally normal thing for angels to be in a cemetery on a Sunday. Now the women, they see the angel and they panic and they drop and they hit the dirt. And by the way, that is the only proper biblical response to seeing an angel. Biblical angels are not cute. They are scary. But this angel, he's a gentleman. He's in a good mood. And he says to them, you don't have to be afraid. And he invites them in to the tomb to check it out and look around. So the women kind of creep into the tomb. They walk past the angel, probably side-eyeing him a little bit as they go into the tomb. And as they get into the tomb to look around, there's another angel. So the angel looks at the shocked women and he lets them know, hey, you're looking for Jesus, but he's stepped out. He will be back. But in the meantime, he wants you to go tell his disciples that he plans to catch up with them in Galilee. So the women are confused. They're a little terrified. They're not sure what's going on, but they're not stupid. So they obey the angel. They head out of the tomb and run the 3/4 of a mile back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples what they'd been told. And as you might expect, most of the disciples think the women are cuckoo. But Peter and John, they want to check it out. So they take off running to the tomb, and Mary trails behind, but she's with them. And John beats Peter there, and he kind of hangs out in front looking around. But Peter, the minute he gets there, he just charges in. And they're looking around the tomb, but they can't, Jesus is not there, but they don't know what's going on. So they leave, they head back. But Mary, she stays by herself at the tomb. And I am glad that this story is in the Bible, because while Mary is recognized as being a special woman, what is really special about her is that she's just like us. Even though she's walked with Jesus, she's normal. Which means at this moment in time, she is a hot mess. She's witnessed a brutal killing. She hasn't slept. She probably hasn't eaten. She is confused, she's angry, she's terrified, she's exhausted. At this point, she is ugly crying. The only one in her entire life who'd saved her from her demons, who had brought her peace, whom she had given her life and her riches to, who claimed to be not only her savior, but the savior of the whole world, is gone. She did not see that coming. She was not ready for it. She couldn't prepare, and that's it. There's no more left in her. She can't put one foot in front of the other anymore. She can't keep calm and carry on. All she can do in this moment is stand there and sob. And as she stands there crying, she looks into the tomb again. Now the angels are back, and they asked her a reasonable question for angels. They asked her, why are you crying? Which is a fair question. They knew, but she didn't. But consider that question from Mary's perspective. She's just lost her Jesus. And not only that, she's standing at the cemetery and his body is missing. Why do you think she's crying? How do you respond if you're Mary? But what's interesting is that Mary doesn't even catch that that's a weird question. She answers them. She says, they've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they put him. She turns around and stands back up. And here is how we know Mary's state of mind right now. There are 2 angels sitting in the tomb again. Okay? Where did they come from? Fair question. Where did they come from? Peter and John were just here. Had there been angels, they'd have noticed, right? And not only that, even if, we account for the fact that possibly the angels at this point had toned down the whole angelic glory thing, and maybe they just look like regular dudes. Even with that, we still have the very cultural problem that it is not normal for dudes to hang out in cemeteries. It's not normal in our culture. It was even less normal in theirs for a whole bunch of reasons. So really what should be happening right now is Mary's spidey senses should be off the charts. But she doesn't even seem to notice. She just turns around and she stands back up. And she turns around, and as she's standing there crying some more, the gardener shows up. Another dude hanging out in a cemetery, asking a crying woman what's wrong. Now, I want to be very clear here. I am not picking on the gardener. We all know that it's Jesus and what's about to happen. But can you imagine being in a garden with a bunch of guys asking you why you're crying? And she answers him very similar to the angels. And she says, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him and I will go get him." And God bless Mary at this moment because she is talking crazy, but we get it, don't we? She is so desperate for another moment with her Lord, with her Jesus, that she's not even thinking about the fact that she is on a mountainous, rocky terrain. And she's talking about if this gardener tells her where the body is, that she's going to go basically go hiking in the mountains, in these Sierras. You're going to go hiking, find this dead body, and by yourself carry back 115 to 130 pounds of literal dead, mangled weight. By herself. That's where her head's at. She is so desperate to be with her Jesus, even in death, that she's not even thinking logically about this. She just wants to be with him. Now, fortunately, the gardener doesn't tell her where the body is. He says to her, "Mary." You can see, huh? What? The confusion, the shock. What? She knows that voice. That voice belongs to her Jesus, but he's dead, right? So she's trying to shake her head. She tries to get clear, and her spirit figures it out long before her brain does. And she exclaims, "My great master," and she flings herself into his arms. He's here. And she holds on so tightly to him that after a moment, he speaks to her. And I want to point out here that the words that Jesus uses here are the same words he uses with his mom. So we have to presume that the tone he's using here is a kind one. He's not on her. He's saying to her, woman, you don't have to cling so tightly to me. It's not yet time for me to return to my Father. I'm going to be here a while, Mary. And I love this. I love that the first recorded act of our risen Jesus is to go find Mary. He understood her. He loved her. And he knew that he was absolutely everything to her. And so when she was confronted with the fact that she not only hadn't lost her Jesus, but that this Messiah guy was way more than she had ever dreamed to imagine, her joy was so complete, so total, so seven, that she flings herself into his arms and gives our Jesus a hug for the history books. And I want to point out, I think it's kind of cool for Jesus too. He's also kind of had a crazy weekend, right? This whole crucifixion, conquering death. This is his welcome back. A woman desperate to be with her Jesus, completely and totally restored again because she has him back. Jesus was always meeting Mary right where she was. And he was fulfilling her deepest needs because he was the answer to her deepest needs. So let us bring this beautiful story home for just a moment. Do we recognize that we are just like Mary? We may not be possessed by 7 demons, but our darkness is real. And his light and his purpose for our lives is real. Do we recognize that? Would we be as devastated as Mary was if we thought that we'd somehow lost our Jesus? And would we be so complete and totally restored to have him? My prayer for myself, my prayer for all of us who may be watching, is that we would recognize, like Mary, how deeply we need our Jesus, and that his purpose for our lives would become our all-encompassing need. May we, like Mary, be able to say honestly with the psalmist, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing that I desire besides you." Ladies, I hope that you've enjoyed the story. I hope it blesses you like it has blessed me. Please have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.